So, welcome everybody to the second part of wireless communication lecture. This is lecture number 7. In this lecture we will talk about the capacity of flat fading channels. In the previous lecture we talked about the channel itself. We tried to understand it, understand its characteristics, from path loss to shadowing to small scale fading, including delay spread, Doppler spread, and Rayleigh distribution, Rayleigh, Nakagami, and all the other details associated with that. So the next question that we will ask ourselves is that having this channel, this is an environment that has these certain characteristics and these features. What's the maximum data rate you can transmit over this channel while having error-free reception? So this is what we'll be studying for different types of channel. So basically we'll study Shannon capacity, then move over capacity over understand and derive capacity of flat fading channels when the fading statistics are known, when the fading known at the receiver, when fading known at both the transmitter and receiver, and we explained the mechanism that can achieve the capacity of this situation by using water filling and channel inversion. Then we study truncated channel inversion as well. So what's Shannon capacity? As I just defined it, it's the channel maximum mutual information you can transmit between the transmitter and receiver. Shannon, in his paper that he published in 1948, he showed that capacity is the maximum error-free data rate a channel can support or afford. Theoretical limit, it gives us limit, bound, says that over this channel, this is the maximum you can achieve. And then after that, engineers come and they try to come up with techniques, transmission designs, schemes that can achieve that limit, if they can. So Shannon studied the problem purely mathematics, then sets design goals, and engineers coming after him try to achieve these goals by practical wireless communication designs. So the channel characteristics here and the amount of information you can send over this channel does not depend on the design techniques. Regardless of the design technique, this is the maximum you can achieve. So for additive wide Gaussian channel, which is the case when you don't have multipath reception, you have only noise added to the receiver side, you cannot escape additive wide Gaussian noise. Having delay spread, Doppler spread, multipath depends all on the wireless environment. But additive wide Gaussian noise, you will always have it, even in wireline communication. This is, we call it, due to thermal noise, due to interference coming from the electronic devices, the interference sources, sun, microwave, electromagnetic spectrum. This produces what we call additive wide Gaussian noise. And the capacity over this type of channel is C equal to bandwidth multiplied by log 2 1 plus gamma. What's gamma? Gamma is the signal to noise ratio of your received signal at the receiver side. B is the signal bandwidth, and gamma can be defined as PR over N naught B. So if I tell you, you have power spectral density of N naught and tell you find the noise power over bandwidth of B. So what do? This is B, your bandwidth, and this is the power spectral density of your noise. To find the power of the noise, you just multiply N naught by B, because this is power spectral density. To find the power, you divide by whatever the x-axis is. which is here bandwidth. So that's why here we have the noise of the power in node B and the received signal power, whatever it is. So practically, how do you measure the SNR? You turn off your transmit signal, and that the spectrum analyzer you go. Usually we use spectrum analyzer to capture signals and see them and visualize them, analyze them. Before you start transmitting, you look at the window of your spectrum analyzer and measure the noise level. So without having any signal, you have certain level. So when you transmit your signal, this level becomes this, for example. So then you say that this was the power of my noise, and this is the new power. Then from these two values you can determine the signal to noise ratio. If they are in dB, the result is actually the subtraction of them. If they are in linear form, then division of them. So based on your setting in your spectrum analyzer, depends on that. Now this gamma only can be defined like this when you have additive white Gaussian noise, but when you have wireless channel and multipath propagation and interference between users, interference because of intersymbol you don't have only this, you have only here also multiple terms here coming. Very, very comprehensive expressions for signal to noise ratio. In that case, we don't call it anymore signal to noise ratio, we call it signal to interference noise ratio. This for wireless channels, but here this is for additive white Gaussian noise channel. This formula is to be remembered. If I, for example, tell you the capacity of your system in additive white Gaussian noise channel depends on what? Depends on bandwidth, depends on the power that I transmit, and depends on the power spectral density. If I tell you I want to increase the capacity, give me two solutions. Increase the power or increase the bandwidth. Yeah, but these two solutions are expensive. Bandwidth is money, and power, you are limited. You cannot transmit your signal with any power you like because you will harm people.
Reduce the noise.
How would you reduce the noise?
Filters.
Of course, yeah, filters one of the techniques that can be used to reduce the noise. Enhance your transmitter and receiver design, enhance your algorithm, come up with techniques that can improve this. But this is not very complicated in additive white Gaussian noise. In other channels, when you have interference coming from different sources, there you need to be very innovative and come up with techniques that can reduce all this interference. Because we say that our communication is interference limited. For example, when you are communicating over a wire line, like Turk Telecom right now, the network there, the cable has very good signal to noise ratio. The only thing that limits the speed in the cable is interference, not noise. You already have 30, 40 dB sometimes, very good signal to noise ratio, very high, 50. You sometimes ignore the effect of the noise when you have such signal to noise ratio. So if I have this signal to noise, what's limiting me? The interference, bandwidth, because you cannot, if you transmit with high speed data rate, your signal bandwidth becomes larger than the bandwidth of your cable, and you get intersymbol interference, and you will have many problems at the receiver side. You might not be able to handle it. Now, we understood what's the value and the capacity of additive white Gaussian noise channel, and how is it dependent on power and bandwidth, and how to calculate them. What's the capacity of flat fading channel? Flat fading, everybody remembers with me flat fading? When flat fading happens? Flat fading, no delay spread, no Doppler spread. I have flat fading, I have all the multipath components reaching the receiver simultaneously and adding up constructively or destructively. And that's why you get that Rayleigh distribution or Rayleigh distribution or Nakagami distribution that shows you the variation and randomness in your channel amplitude versus its probability. So when you have this distribution, for example, and you have the values here are probabilities, the y-axis, and the x-axis shows you the amplitude of your channel. Yes? So what's the probability that your amplitude is, for example, 3 has maximum probability? What's the probability that your channel has amplitude of 5? Almost 0. So this is how you can read the distribution of your flat fading channel. In this case, capacity defines theoretical rate limit. This is the maximum you can achieve. You cannot achieve more than this. Maximum error-free rate a channel can support. Of course, this is the rate you can send over this channel while you are receiving it without errors. Depends on what's known about the channel. So at the end of the day, if you ask me to give you a limit, just tell me what information the receiver has about the channel and what information the transmitter has about the channel. If the channel is known, I may have a solution. If the channel is not known, the response of the channel, I may not even be able to derive the limit. So that's heavily dependent on the knowledge about the channel, whether at the transmitter or receiver. For example, suppose that you know the statistics of your fading. What I mean by statistics? You know the mean, the variance, the autocorrelation function. This might not help you much because this is not the instantaneous channel state information response you have about the channel. And this information will make it very difficult to predict the exact amount of information you can transmit over your channel. However, when fading is known at the receiver only, not the transmitter, and I mean by fading the channel state information, we call it CSI, which is exactly the channel response at any instant of time, at any frequency point. This is what I mean by channel state information. Full channel knowledge, instantaneous, not statistics, not mean. When you get this mean, if I tell you the mean of this signal is 5, can you tell me what's this point? You can never predict what's this point from the mean. The mean is 5, but what's the value at this point of time? You cannot tell. So when you have the information of all these points, when you know what's the value of the channel at all these points, we call it instantaneous. Instantaneous means at all instants of time. When you have such knowledge, you can calculate the capacity. After you do the information theory math, the capacity is found to be the integration from 0 to infinity, which is covering the probability distribution function. Have you ever seen a probability distribution function going to minus? That's why we have from 0 to infinity. The amplitude is always, the probability distribution we are dealing with are always for amplitude, yes? And the amplitude is always positive, so you care about the positive x-axis, and with the probability, the shape of the distribution determines the probability values. So in that case, you have the bandwidth multiplied by log 2 1 plus gamma. This up until here, it's additive white Gaussian noise capacity. And then you multiply it by the distribution of the instantaneous signal to noise ratio. Now, how is the signal to noise ratio in a fading channel is different than the signal to noise ratio in an additive white Gaussian noise channel? The difference is that, go back here, Here you have only at the numerator you have only PR, but when you have fading you have also absolute value of h square, and this is instantaneous at each point of time or at each frequency instant. So in that case the power, the received power, is heavily influenced and affected by the power of your channel, which you can calculate it from the amplitude and square it. So since this is random variable, you doesn't get one value, takes range of values with different probabilities. Due to this reason, you must include the PDF of that fading phenomenon. That's why you here kind of average the channel capacity with respect to the distribution P gamma. P gamma, this can be Rayleigh, can be Rayleigh, can be whatever distribution. You just put that distribution here with this equation and this, keeping in mind that in this gamma you have absolute value of h square, and integrate with respect to instantaneous gamma. So this gamma in this equation is basically different than this gamma. This gamma is average. This gamma is instantaneous because it has the channel within the equation. The channel amplitude, this one, the one I wrote here. So if you can find this integration, then we say that you have found the closed form expression for the maximum channel capacity of your fading channel. Is it clear? So the difficulty here, when you put the distribution, can you integrate that distribution? And the integration of a PDF usually tends to be the CDF, but when you have also another equation which is function of the same variable that the PDF depends on, then things gets more complicated and you need to handle it in a way or another. Now this is for the case when you have channel state information at the receiver. Yes, question. Yeah, sometimes when you cannot find closed form expression analytically, you resort to numerical methods to find at a specific point of time, and in this case you end up having tables, mapping, and at this point, like a Q function. A Q function, what's a Q function? Everybody knows a Q function. Q function is the integration of the Gaussian distribution usually, which is function of e to minus x squared. What's the integration of this? Has no integration. You cannot find closed form expression for this. The way to find it by lookup table, by numerical methods, using MATLAB, other techniques. At specific point you get the value. So now the other case, when you have knowledge of the fading at the transmitter and receiver, in this case your capacity result will change. You have multiplex optimal strategy over each channel state. So you need to use something at the transmitter, adapt your power values at the transmitter side, and allocate them to your data points in such a way that you compensate for the fading. Suppose your channel is like this, your channel, and all of a sudden experience this deep fade. This deep fade, you cannot send your data as is. If you know the channel state information at the receiver and you know that there is a deep fade here, you must send more power over that instant of time so that you compensate for the loss of amplitude in your signal. The channel really acts like a filter. Let me explain more. For example, you have your received signal, you send direct, and your channel, and this is in frequency domain. and your channel was something like this. And since we are in frequency domain, we can multiply them, dot multiplication. What do you get at the receiver? You get something like the output, something like this. So obviously the output signal got affected by the channel. The channel can amplify or can kills your signal, demagnify your signal to low level amplitude. To avoid this, ahead of the time you increase the amplitude of your signal over this instant of time. You make it like this. You make your signal at this point of time, you increase the power. So this is what you need to do when you have the knowledge of the channel at the transmitter, because the transmitter is responsible for sending the data, yes? So since you have this knowledge, you can utilize it effectively and accordingly determine what would be the power value of my signal at this frequency or at this point of time. For fixed transmit power, when you transmit same power over all the time instances, same as with only received knowledge of fading, this is exactly when you have no knowledge of the fading at the transmitter, you cannot do anything. That's why you just transmit equal power over all your data. A transmit power in this case has, since we can manipulate the power, the transmit power, it has a distribution which is function of gamma. Depends on the instantaneous SNR, you change the power values of your transmit data, and this leads to the capacity equation given as below when you have the knowledge of your channel state information at the transmitter. So what happens here? We just added new distribution, we call it the power distribution. This is, don't confuse P small with P capital. P small represents the distribution of your instantaneous signal to noise ratio due to the channel. P capital represents the distribution due to the power you allocate to your data at the transmitter. And P capital with dash over it, it represents what? The average power. So your problem now, to maximize this capacity, to maximize this formula, given that the distribution of your power at the transmitter is equal or less than certain average power value. So we call this E expectation, and P here is the distribution of your power. So the expectation here should be limited to a certain value, so that you say that your system within this power can achieve this capacity. If you put no constraints on your power, then you can achieve any capacity you want. And we are always limited with power by regulations. We cannot transmit at any power we want, because we would interfere with others, we would hurt ourselves, we would do bad things. It's not good. That's why we have regulation in power. So having this limitation, a practical limit, a practical constraint, what would be the capacity? Now this, you need to solve this. How do you solve this? As wireless engineers, sometimes, as it usually happens, you need to borrow some information and knowledge from math. So a way to solve this is to use Lagrangian optimization method, and this, the constraint here, you put it within the equation and you derive with respect to the probability distribution function of the power at the receiver. And after you solve this optimization problem, you found out that the optimal solution of your power distribution is given as follows: 1 over gamma naught minus 1 over gamma. If your gamma is greater than certain threshold, we call it gamma naught. And Otherwise, if it's not satisfied, then it's 0. So this says that if your gamma node below certain threshold, don't transmit any information over that instant of time. Why? In this case, you will have deep fade. This deep fade can go to 0. If you want to put power here, can you, the amount of power you need to compensate for this deep fade 0 can go to infinity. You are not allowed to go to infinity. Why? Because you need to equalize this. You need to, this is 0. What's the value that I multiplied with this so that I can compensate it? 1 over how much should I, so that I can reach unity, for example. 1 over 0, how much? It's not 0, but I'm saying the number can be 10 to minus 16. 1 over 10 to minus 16, you take the power of a country. It's not, doesn't make sense, not logical, just exclude it. I don't need to transmit over that deep fade instant of time. Just eradicate it. So, however, when the value is reasonable, which is greater than gamma naught, then the amount of power I need to allocate is given as follows. In this case, you will be able to adjust the distribution of your input power in such a way that satisfies the capacity of your fading channel when you have the knowledge of the channel at the transmitter. So in general, in this case, the capacity can be given as follows. This is the final expression. So as you can see, when we have the knowledge of the channel at the transmitter, we are able to make some optimization and adjust our power distribution so that we can eliminate the loss due to the fading characteristics. Also, we have channel inversion. This technique, what we call it water filling. You just, if you have deep fade here, you just fill it until you reach this point. Considering this point is corresponds to the limit on your power. So you just fill. You have this value, you fill by this value. You have the filling. We call this the blue area. The complement values that can make you reach 1 over gamma naught, which corresponds to the limit power that you are limited to it and you must not exceed it. So now you have a much easier solution, which is channel inversion. Let's say your channel is something like this, and I'm not saying that these values are 0, and you want to compensate for this. What do? You just, this is your H, you divide your power that you need to allocate to your transmit data is 1 over H, amplitude of H. In your simulation you use amplitude, but in practice it's power, so 1 over magnitude of H square. So suppose this value is 0.8 and you want it to reach to 1 unity, you are limited to unity power. So what you invert it. What's the inversion of this? 1 over 0.8, 1 over 0.8 multiplied by the channel 0.8 with 0.8 cancel, so you are left with 1, which is the power limit. This can be P in general actually, but we just take an example when it's unity. So channel inversion seems to be similar to water filling algorithm, but it's much easier, direct. But you need to be careful about the extreme deep fade. The extreme deep fade, like you have amplitude of this value, 0.00, I mean, in this case, 1 over this can go to infinity almost. So you need to avoid this. So you must know the threshold at which you can apply this technique. And anything below this threshold, you just cancel, you don't transmit over it, because you don't have enough power to cancel the effect of the channel. And this simplifies design because you have fixed rate. It greatly reduces capacity. And here the thing I was talking about it. Once you know the threshold at which you can make channel inversion, anything below that you ignore, and since you ignore it and you don't transmit over it, we call it truncated inversion. You invert your channel to a limit. After this limit, you don't invert. For example, let's say you are transmitting over frequency selective channel, and the response over different frequencies was like this. And let's say this was this 10 to minus 10, and this 0.5 or 1.5, 1.8. Which sub-channels you must not transmit over them in this case, assuming that you cannot exceed power equal to 3, for example. It's obvious that this one over this value will go beyond 3. You can put limit on the average power, or you can put limit on the power per subcarrier. When you put limit on the power per subcarrier, this will be helpful for the power amplifier, because the input of the power, you reduce the fluctuations in your amplitude, which is desirable by the power amplifier. But when you have average, limit on the average, this doesn't mean that all the subcarriers, they have the same power. But the most important thing, when you sum them all, they don't exceed the power, the average power. So in this case, invert channel above cutoff fade depth. This is the thing I was talking about. Cutoff fade depth, like this, 10 to minus 10. Constant signal to noise ratio, fixed rate above cutoff. Cutoff greatly increases capacity. And this is close to optimal somehow. You cannot do much better than this. So, like we talked about the capacity for additive white Gaussian channel, flat fading when you have the knowledge of the channel at the receiver, and when you have the knowledge of the transmitter and receiver, and when we have the knowledge of the channel at the transmitter, we have two techniques to achieve capacity: water filling and channel inversion. Assuming that we use certain cutoff so that we don't use too much power beyond what we are allowed to use. So if someone tells you draw the capacity, the channel capacity versus signal to noise ratio for additive white Gaussian noise. So you just generate the values of the channel using the distribution you are given, and you run your system, you send your data without sending any data even. From the channel itself, you just put certain threshold and calculate this value here. You will end up getting curves like this. This is not by simulation. You can find it by numerical simulation, you can find it by theory. Theory, you just need to draw the equation. By simulation, you need to generate values. But any way you select, at the end of the day, you will get curves similar to this. And for additive white Gaussian noise, as you can see here, you have maximum channel capacity. We call this the Shannon capacity of additive white Gaussian noise. Now, Shannon capacity with the transmit and receiver channel state information, we get this. As you can see, which one has more capacity, the additive white Gaussian noise or the fading channel, when you have the knowledge of the transmitter and receiver channel state information? The additive white Gaussian noise, because at a specific SNR, this additive white Gaussian noise has more, you can transmit over it more bits per second per hertz, while this less, because it has lower amplitude. And this line represents Shannon capacity with channel state information known only at the receiver side. So as you can see, when I have information only at the receiver side, I have lowest channel capacity. When I have information at both the transmitter and receiver, I have middle. When I don't have fading whatsoever, I have best performance in terms of capacity. Now, the point is to come up with techniques that can achieve this performance. Can you design your system, practical system, so that you can follow, the capacity of your system can follow up with this curve? Usually it doesn't, because practical system require you, especially in digital communication, to send limited number of values, finite number of values, discrete. And that's why, for example, if you are using QBSK, how many discrete values you have? You have four different values in 4 quadrants. So in this case, the channel with the capacity, when you draw it, it becomes like this. It saturates. This is actually 16 equam. Saturates at what? At 4. Saturates at 4 bit per second per hertz. So obviously you are not following up with this, not following even with this. So the design, usually you should use large number of discrete values, discrete waveforms, discrete symbols, so that you can follow up with the theoretical capacity curve. However, when you use large number of discrete values of your symbol, your detection process at the receiver will become extremely complex, because the receiver, how the receiver detector works, uses usually ML detector, maximum likelihood. You need to go search among all the available symbols, which one is the closest to the symbol you transmitted, to the symbol you received. And the closest, you pick it as the one that was transmitted. Suppose you have 128, you need to do 128 for loop operation to find that, usually, which increase complexities, increase delays, exhaust your processing power, and all the other drawbacks associated with that. So is that understood a little bit? How is it related, and what are the limits, and why it's difficult to achieve sometimes the limit in practical cases? Besides, also, when you have large number of values, discrete values, you have large peak to average power ratio. Because, for example, when you transmit 16 equam, which is a modulation scheme, versus, for example, 64 equam, the 16 equam is much better than 16 in terms of peak to average power ratio, in terms of power amplifier amplification. Why? Because it has lower number of values, low fluctuations in the amplitude. While in C, it's a trade-off process. You approach the capacity, but when you approach the capacity with certain design, you find out that your design is not practical, causes many other problems. So the challenge, how can you come up with a design that can offer capacity as close as possible to the capacity shown in Shannon equation, while also make it practical? I don't want too much complexity, too much delay. I don't want the system to be not friendly with power amplifier. All these constraints and other issues that you must look at while you are designing your system. This is over Rayleigh. When you have log normal, you will have different curves, but you will get the same conclusion almost, that additive white Gaussian noise has largest channel capacity, and then follow up with fading with none at the transmitter and receiver, and then fading none at the receiver only. The zero voltage capacity here, I didn't talk about. It's you put a threshold and you say, what's the probability that my capacity will be larger than this value? If it's not, we call it zero. Since it's zero, the threshold here is zero. So when you are not able to send information over a specific channel, a specific instant of time or a specific frequency, you will report that you have capacity outage capacity, because it falls below the zero. So this is basically the Shannon capacity for different types of channels with different information at the transmitter and receiver, and how the practical systems are sometimes conflicting with this limit. They cannot reach the limit, and if they reach, they bring complexity and other issues. And this is very critical thing that we always need to do, because at the end of the day you are designing new systems. When you design, you need to simulate your system and compare with this. If your design is coming here, the curve, then this shows that you are doing something wrong. This is one advantage for these equations. The other advantage puts a bar for us where we can all of us compete to reach closer to this, and know that if we go beyond this, this means that we are doing something fishy, which we must fix. So the main points that you need to take from this presentation is that fundamental channel capacity defines maximum data rate that can be supported on a channel. Capacity in fading channels depends on what's known at the transmitter and receiver. Capacity with received channel state information is average of additive white Gaussian noise channel, and the reason why it's average, because you take the expectation over the probability distribution of your gamma. Capacity with the transmit receive knowledge requires optimal adaptation based on the current channel state information, whether you use water filling or channel inversion. Almost same capacity as with received knowledge only. Without adaptation, if you don't use adaptation, even if you have the knowledge of the channel at the transmitter, you end up getting the same capacity of when you have the knowledge only at the receiver. Channel inversion has poor performance but significantly improves with truncation. If you don't consider truncation, you will get very bad performance, but with optimal adaptive selection for the truncation point, you can get very good performance. With this, we finish our lecture for today and meet you in next week. Thank you very much for your attention.